Hi, everybody. Welcome to AstroLunaChick's Guide to the Universe. I am your host, Susan, aka AstroLunaChick, and I'm here to talk about what the hell is going on in the heavens and what is up your anus. Thanks for joining me again for this weekly overview of the astrology aspects. I'm recording this on Saturday, October 8th. It's going to air on the 9th, which is Sunday, and that's the full moon. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the full moon, even though in my last podcast, I went right up to tomorrow, Sunday. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And I hope everyone's doing well, and hopefully everyone's Mercury retrograde wasn't too eventful. It was interesting. I'm happy. I feel like things are sort of evening out and getting back to normal, whatever that is. It just seemed like with towards the end there was a lot of just a lot of intensity and details and things for me personally, because I had some paperwork that I had to file that kind of all like it's been going on for a while, but it all kind of piled up at the last minute. And I mean, not because I put it off, but because I was waiting for other people. And I did see where there was miscommunication and just things that I didn't think actually had things I thought had to be filed, found out that they didn't have to be filed, and that was a relief, but I had stressed out about it anyway, as you do. And but that all worked itself out, and so that's kind of where we're at. It does feel like like this past week things sort of were slowly lifting, like whatever was kind of confused or things we were waiting on possibly, or if it was an inner mental emotional process, things are sorting itself out. We're getting some kind of clarity. We're also past that Mercury opposite Neptune, which kind of felt like even if we did have clarity, maybe we weren't really ready to speak about it or announce our decision or solidify things. So, if you go with your intuition with Mercury retrograde, I really actually think that it's a really good time to rehash some things. And when it comes to our own inner world and our emotions and our relationships and thought process and communication and our own personal growth, I think that it's a fantastic time. I've always looked forward to it because I feel like things are so normal during Mercury direct, and I just love Mercury retrograde because it comes in and like kind of well, Mercury is Hermes in mythology. So if you look at the archetype of Mercury and Hermes, Hermes is the god of one of the gods that is not gods, but like he's a messenger actually for between the gods and the humans. So what he does, what he's his function is as a psychopomp, which in the mythology is the he plays the role of going down into the underworld, Hades. Well, what it represents our subconscious and the things beneath our awareness, you know. So it brings a lot of things up, and I like that. I mean, a lot of people some people don't like that because, you know, you have to function, and when you bring up things from the darkness that some people would like to have swept under the rug, and people who operate, let's say, in deception can often be called out and be exposed. So I like that kind of stuff. And you know, I just like observing and watching things play out, and it's just weird. It's always like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen during this retrograde season. But anyway, there was a lot going on, and in the beginning of the retrograde, I did mention about the there were potential strikes going on and union negotiations. I haven't checked back in on that, but I mean, the last I heard of it was that they had tentative, you know, reached a tentative agreement, and they were still talking about it. So there were still things that were being negotiated. And I I felt at that time, because of where Mercury was, and we had the sun um and Venus, um the first thing that popped to my mind, also because there was an aspect to an asteroid called Ascalaphus. I never know how to say that. Ascalaphus. And he's another underworld kind of god, where like he's involved in, he's the one who snitches to Hades on Persephone for eating the pomegranate seeds. So it carries this sort of archetype of snitch. So what I thought was, you know, obviously whistleblower, and that came out actually not necessarily within that particular story or scene where they had the potential strikes, but it came up all over the place everywhere else. So it was interesting. And I still feel like now that Mercury's direct and past Neptune, I felt like there was a gathering of information. And I feel like we might hear some more stuff and lawsuits being filed, perhaps, because when Mercury goes back into Libra this coming week, trying to see when that is. I think it's, anyway, I'll go over it in the forecast, but it's this week. It's going to oppose Jupiter, and Jupiter has to do with the law and justice. So you know, whether it's looking for balance and justice in our own personal relationships, personal situations, things that we're weighing, our process, or if it's an actual like legal situation, we may start to hear about some things that are being filed or appealed or readdress, you know, addressed or come to the forefront, things from the past too. And yeah, that would be when Mercury goes into Libra. Oh, that's the 11th. So that's, yeah, that's Tuesday. So let me just take a little pause here to share the screen. Now, you might be just listening to this. You could be hearing this on Spotify or Anchor. or you might be listening on etalk.tv, and I hope you are, because my show is running on etalk.tv, and I would love for everyone to go over there and check it out, no matter where you're listening, or you might be watching on YouTube. So if you're listening to the show, you can go, just know you can go to YouTube and check out my channel, AstroLunaChick. Please subscribe and hit the little notification bell, ring my bell, so that you can get updates when I have new shows coming out. So I'm going to share my screen for those of you who are on a visual platform. And if you're just listening in, give me a second. And I'm going to share my iPad. There we go. There's my screen. And yeah, so like I was said, if you're listening, you can go back and find the YouTube video if you want to see what's actually happening in the chart as I am discussing it. But if not, just, sit back, relax, chill, and listen in. So I'm going to start with Sunday, October 9th. That is the full moon. It's an 8-day in numerology. Now, if you're looking at the screen, you'll notice that the full moon is going to be opposite the sun. That's what a full moon is. Moon opposite sun. And the sun is shining its full light on the moon and bringing things up from the depths. The moon represents our emotions. It represents the collective mood, so to speak. So wherever the moon is during any, on any given day, it's what we're all experiencing together. It's like the overarching energy that is out there. So this full moon, sort of a bookend to the new moon that we would have had back in the spring. And as we entered into the fall equinox, we enter into the harvest season of everything that has gone on, all our efforts and accomplishments, all of our seeds that have been sown throughout the year, from Aries season to Libra. And the Aries Libra axis is a relational axis. Actually, all axes are relational because it represents the self and the other, but Aries, being the first sign of the zodiac, is the sign that represents the self. So things associated with Aries. Aries is a fire sign, and it's the idea of I exist, I am here. It is the first impulse of the spirit to enter the body. It is the first awareness of manifestation of spirit in the body. And as far as the body goes, the physical body, it represents the head. It's the natural first house. And Aries is ruled by the planet Mars. So Aries and Mars associations. The color red, blood, sharp objects, anger, aggression, assertiveness, yang energy, masculine energy. It's the id in psychology. So the first house and Aries is like the it represents the baby being born, right? Hopefully head first, unless it's a breach. And so yeah, Aries representing the head and the first sign of the zodiac. Aries and Mars govern police, military, war. So again, sharp objects, but like the instruments of war and defense. Okay. So Aries being the me, the self, and then Libra, the opposite, being the other, and who we are in relationship, having to balance between the self and the other. And the full moon is conjunct Aries. Chiron, which is an Aries, and Chiron is the wounding, the healing. So, we're talking about the ego, the id, the wounding, the self, the identity, self-consciousness, self-awareness. Everything having to do with the identity and wanting to be recognized as an individual or to assert ourselves as an individual. So the feeling that comes out with the full moon is one of wanting to be free to be me, pursue my healing. It is centered around the self, right? And maybe thinking about what has hurt our ego. But it's also confrontational and standing up to things. So it's opposite the sun and, sun in Libra, looking at potentially how to balance things in a conflict, or sometimes if things are imbalanced and unfair, we have to take action. It's the nature of conflict and warfare. So anyway, we're coming off of that on Sunday, and everything that happens subsequent to the full moon is going to be kind of interesting and very much still in the martial Aries arena, because the moon right after that makes a sextile to Mars. So yeah, that's what we're dealing with on the weekend. And then we get to Monday. Again, Monday 10/10 is where we start our week now, and moon is still in Aries for the first part of the day, and it's making a hard aspect. First, it makes on Sunday, because everything leads, one thing leads to another. It's like, she said this, and that's when the fight started, where they did that, and that's when the fight started. So wherever we find ourselves, or whatever we seem to be wanting to move forward and take action on Monday, is coming off of the heels of the full moon realization. Whatever bubbled up, or I wouldn't say it bubbled up, it shot up from the depths of our Aries fire. We're off like a rocket on Monday. But so there is action being taken, and then that leads to on Monday early starting the week off with a moon square to Pluto. And that can be a power struggle. That could be asserting our own our own personal power, or we could be seeing certain things play out with power dynamics and maybe some obsession and control, where people are being steamrollered. Because with the Aries moon, it's kind of like, Aries, don't get offended, but if you're an Aries, but Aries tend to think about themselves first. And generally speaking, with the first 5 signs of the zodiac, like, I think we really don't start to be aware of the other until Virgo, where we're kind of participating and helping, and then Libra is we're getting more aware of relationships. But Aries comes from a self perspective, whereas, let's say, Libra through Pisces is considered more other focused. That makes sense. We should be balanced. We should have about a good balance between, self-awareness and awareness of the other person. But generally speaking, Aries needs to learn to see things from the other person's perspective. There can be a general tendency to like just move forward as if like they were the only one in the situation. Not all Aries, don't come for me, but it's kind of a trait where they tend to be a little self-focused. It is a self-focused energy. As it matures, it becomes more aware, but there can be some power issues going on here on Monday, or being faced with looking at and having to deal with a intensely powerful type of change that we're going through, because that's Pluto which is in the sign of Capricorn. Now, Capricorn is the existing structure, the status quo, government, power structures in general, and the old system. That's what our US Pluto return is about. We are ending a long cycle of operating within a particular system of governance, let's say. And with the Aries full moon, we may be resisting being governed, being manipulated, controlled, feeling powerless. So we maybe need to react. We find ourselves being reactive. Aries moon is reactive, and Pluto is like kill or be killed. It's kind of like the moon Pluto square. But there could be just a real sense of courage and bravery to fight back in situations where we've been oppressed. And at this point on Monday, Mercury is like right on the cusp of Libra. So this is all the receipts that Mercury was gathering when it went from Libra, where it said, hey, things are not fair and balanced here. We need to go back and look some things over. And it went back and entered back into Virgo, where it started really collecting some receipts, because Virgo is an earth sign, and it's practical, it's details, it's analysis. And so that's what Mercury's been doing since it went direct. So yeah, what was that, second? Anyway, it's like right about ready to go into Libra and face Jupiter, the judge or justice, the court, filing, saying, This is unfair. We need some justice here. So if it has anything to do with a situation that you're dealing with, you might see things start to move forward in a situation or, relationship or court case, or, if you're watching what's playing out, in the world in general. Um, Overall, things seem to be stabilizing. Mars is square to Neptune. So whereas Mercury was opposite Neptune, so the mind, Mercury, communications, still a little bit murky, like still trying to get a grasp on what is that Neptune is trying to show us or trying to hide from us, right? But then when it comes to Mars, Mars is action, taking action and being assertive and going to war, whether it's literal or figuratively. And yeah, there could be like a lot of flip-flopping back and forth with decision making. There can be with this aspect, which is starting on Monday, this sort of flip-flop back and forth, like not sure. And Mars also speaks to motive, and Gemini is our words, our communications, duality. It almost seems like sand shifting below our feet in a sense, because if we're looking for external validation of the decisions and the actions that we need to take, it might be hard to find. So it really kind of comes down to, and probably, the message of the Aries full moon, and then the moon as it sextiles to Mars, to say, you know what, you're an individual. You have to decide what's best for you based on your own intuition. And maybe Mercury retrograde brought up some information that we were not aware of, perhaps. So perhaps we need to recalculate or reimagine the way we are going to move forward. And there could be so many options with Gemini. That's multiple options. Anyway, so we've got a trine forming that's starting to form, but it'll be exact on the 11th between the Sun and Saturn. So it feels like a little bit more stabilization, or we are seeing some sort of restriction or roadblock, perhaps, and having to make some kind of adjustments coming up. All right, so let's get off Monday. There we go. Tuesday. So Mercury has gone into Libra, and it is looking at justice or the beliefs, the faith in the future. It can be very optimistic, but oppositions, when I look at the planets in opposition, oftentimes I think of them as two people having a conversation. So before Mercury went retrograde, it did already oppose Jupiter. So there could have been a conversation. This would be part 2. This would be, now you have more information. You've been able to get past whatever anxiety or obsession or, the details or the criticism, self-worth issues, or, maybe that's us critiquing when Mercury was in Virgo. Virgo can be very critical. So there could have been there was a lot of judgmental stuff going on, I did observe a lot of that. People were super, super judgy. Because of course I'm looking on Twitter, and Facebook. So, you get a lot of clues to what's going on in the psyche of the collective when you observe these things. So a lot of the Virgo stuff seems to be kind of, the Virgo nitpicky, critical, judgmental, sort of, excuse me, projecting the shadow onto other people. That's the type of thing where like somebody will accuse you and shame you and call you out for stuff that they have actually done, or maybe they were fine and they benefited from whatever you were doing until it suited them to use it as fodder against you. I'm so glad Virgo season is over, and I'm really going to be happy for Mercury in Libra, because yeah. Anyway, maybe seeing things like from the other person's perspective. That was a lot of what I was talking about with the Mercury retrograde, is like going back to things from the past and maybe seeing things a little clearer, because we're hopefully a little bit more mature and not just thinking about ourselves, but thinking about things, being able to have empathy and put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And hopefully, there's a conversation here between people hashing things out. It just seems like the conversation, if it hasn't been had, it always seems like during that Mercury retrograde where there's this like conversation that wants to be had. So maybe by Tuesday, things will be kind of hashed out with people. And so we'll have the moon in Taurus. Taurus, it actually goes into Taurus later in the day, throughout the course of the day on Monday. Oh, and I did make a note to myself that I was going to talk about the void of course moons. I think I'll do that at the end, so I could just list them off. But anyway, so moon in Taurus tends to be like pretty slow moving, pretty solid, steady, grounded. Not a super quick moving energy. And the moon on Tuesday, mid afternoon to later in the day, and depending on where you are, East or West Coast, because I'm just really looking at time zones in the US, North America. So the moon will on Tuesday hit the North Node, which is at 14 degrees of Taurus, and then it will conjunct Uranus and oppose the Sun. So the Sun is opposed to Uranus. I'm sorry, in conjunct. The Sun is in conjunct. So very different energy we have with moon, North Node, Uranus in Taurus. It wants stable grounding. It's about material resources, stability, finance, the physical body. And Libra is an air sign. So earth and air, it can be a little bit of a challenge there. So, on the one hand, we want to be cerebral about it. We want to have good communication. We want to try to bring balance to situations and relationships. We have to, at this point, also look at what is practical and stable and look at the changes, because Uranus is bringing a lot of changes to finances, to physical stability. And it's also pushing us towards the future. Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius, is very like visionary type energy and sudden, quick, zoom, zap. So Uranus is bringing a lot of earth changes, let's say, when it comes to seismic and volcanic activity. That's the Uranus energy zapping the planet. So anyway, feeling energy in the body. We maybe have feeling sort of like out of sorts a little bit. That's just the energy of the in conjunct, also known as the quincunx, which is if you're looking at the chart, it's not opposite. It's like to either side 30 degrees of a planet. And you can't really see that unless you're watching on YouTube. But anyway, when we have aspects to Uranus, we do have this sort of like push forward in a sense, but it can be a little uncomfortable because Uranus and Saturn are squaring, and they have been, but they're pretty exact right now, close enough. 18, between 18 19 degrees, and they're both retrograde, so the energy is strong there. The need for change is strong. I mean, we might know what needs to change or what is changing, but when we have aspects to Uranus, and let's say when the moon goes through there, there's a real physical, tangible sign of the thing that needs to change. So literally whatever's causing you discomfort within yourself or your relationships, or there are things out of balance with the Uranus Saturn square, because Saturn represents the past and Uranus, we're looking towards the future. There's a tension there, and it's uncomfortable. So look at where you're feeling uncomfortable. Now, there is a positive aspect or a supportive aspect with a trine from the sun to Saturn. So, I mean, this could be looking at your own relationships through a more mature lens, or looking at your past and relationships, because it's Libra, the sun in Libra, and what's fair and balanced, and equality, so to speak. And Saturn, what is the new structure, because Saturn is trying to build a new structure for the future in Aquarius. And this can also have something to do with technology and restrictions also, and looking at what could be fair and balanced, and maybe what's out of balance and not fair and not quite in alignment with the way we're moving towards the future. It makes me actually think of the new restrictions on PayPal, where they're gonna fine you $2,500 if they don't like the content or posting. Like, seriously? All right, so that's another thing, like another way that we can look at what's going on with this aspect, in a sense of financial restriction, governance. But PayPal is not a government entity, but yet they're trying to be punitive in the way you express yourself and spend your money. Really? Really, PayPal? Really? Really? So there could be some pushback against that. Let's see. I don't know how that will turn out. Because also, we have Venus here in Libra, and she rules the sign of Libra also. She also rules the sign of Taurus. So in her Taurus rulership, she is talking about all the things that relate to our physical experience here on Earth, our resources, and what we're building. In Libra, she's more relational and fairness, balance, justice, right? And coming in to work with Saturn later on in the week when she makes a trine to Saturn. So this should all be very interesting to watch. So there will be something coming up about fairness, justice, relationships, resources, finance, restrictions, authority, government, blah, blah, blah. All right, let's move on. October 12th, Wednesday. Oh, I forgot to mention, Tuesday, the 11th, is a 9-day. So if you've been following along, you know things end on a 9-day, and then on the 1, something else, something new starts, or a new phase of a situation. So in some respect, whatever has been happening and building up since the last 1 day ends on the 9, right? So what would that have been? The 12th? No, wait, not the 12th. Forget it. I don't feel like doing that. So the 12th is a 1. That was my point. My point is the 11th is a 9, the 12th is a 1. Something new begins. And the moon is in Taurus. And it is going to make a trine to Pluto. So some sort of consolidated financial effort, stability, our emotions, our needs, our physical needs, physical resources, need of control over resources. Because now don't forget, Pluto is direct. Pluto just went direct on the 8th. So a week before and a week after, we see that intensity of Pluto sort of flare up when the planet is going direct. And so with the moon aspecting Pluto, it's definitely facilitating the control over resources, or dealing with the deep psychological processes and understanding of how the structure may be changing financially again. And we'll also make a sextile to Neptune, so helping us to perhaps envision and create something that's more ethereal, spiritual, and hopefully giving us some kind of tangible evidence of whatever Neptune has been doing, because it is pretty strong. So we may be getting some kind of physical evidence of that, and Pluto there. So I think all in all, the lack of clarity that Neptune has brought throughout the retrograde, especially over the last week, and being uncertain, that is clearing up, and probably that Taurus moon makes us feel a little bit more stable. And we still have going on all week that Mars square to Neptune. It's not all bad. I mean, you could, not see where you're going and take a misguided action. But Neptune in Pisces is also very spiritual, it's very compassionate, has a lot of empathy. So Mars in Gemini, we could be seeing people taking action through empathy, because squares represent action. There's friction that comes with the square, the need to act. We're pushed. We're being what's the word I'm looking for? Inspired to act, and acting quickly. Mars in Gemini really felt like things were speeding up. I was just having this conversation the other day. Like, well, somebody said, it feels like time is speeding up. And I said, yeah, that's Mars in Gemini. Because when Mars was in Taurus, it was like, oh my God, could things move any slower? Oh, it was just excruciating. For anybody who likes things to keep moving at a steady pace, it's a little difficult. So anyway, that's pretty much the 12th. Let's see what else. Well, the moon will be conjunct Algol when it makes that trine to Pluto. So Algol is a pretty potent star. And I was just looking at the minimum and maximum, what they call minima of Algol. Now, Algol is a binary star. It has a twin. And so what you have is the main star, but it has a satellite, and so it tends to look like it's blinking out or dimming. And the cycle is a roughly 2.5-day cycle, similar to the time that the moon spends in a sign. So I thought that was very interesting. But the blinking of the Medusa in ancient astrology, they knew, God knows how they knew, but they knew when the Medusa was strong, because it was when it was not obscured, and they would not go to war, let's say, during that time when it was obscured, because it was weak. It was in a weakened state. So I think that's kind of interesting. I'll be watching to see what happens on that day. That's Wednesday. All right, moving on to Thursday. Now, Thursday, the moon is in Gemini. And the moon's not making too many aspects except early. It starts off the day with a sextile to Jupiter, which is positive, but it's positive meaning it is helping and supporting. So however Jupiter is functioning for you personally at 2 degrees of Aries, retrograde, whatever it's happening, however it's happening, playing out for people personally, whatever what we were talking about, when Mercury went into Libra, opposed Jupiter on the 11th, 10th into the 11th, and the 12th. On the 13th, you'll see some action or news regarding communication, regarding whatever started at the beginning of the week. So whether it was a news story you're following, or you found out that, I don't know, somebody is filing a lawsuit. I don't know why I always go back to lawsuits, but there has been a whole lot regarding investigations and internal investigations in all entities and agencies across the board that have to do with fairness, justice, legal, law enforcement. So a lot of people are paying attention to this. So there will be something that comes out on the 13th, which is a 2-day. So yeah, the moon makes us, we start out with a sextile to Jupiter and a trine to Mercury. So there is something happening, there is communication, things are coming out that we didn't know before, we weren't aware of, because whatever comes up with the full moon, it disseminates as the moon wanes. So in the waxing, we're building up. In the waning, we're disseminating. That means that information comes out. Information gets disseminated. So overall, if you have to communicate with people, that's a great day to do it. I think whatever we see with the Mercury retrograde delays, or if there was any kind of snafus for people, those are working themselves out. And so moving right along. We still have that all week. We have Mars squaring Neptune, which you got to watch out for. You know, Neptune is also substances, and Mars in Gemini can be driving and transportation. So, I mean, anything having to do really with with substances or decision making and the lack of clarity there, lack of sobriety. Anyway, just be on the lookout. Some crazy drivers out there. Now the moon will conjunct to Mars on the 14th, which is a 3, and that's Friday. We will have the moon making a trine to Saturn, which says slow down, make good decisions, be mature, have integrity, be respectful. There is a sense of needing to fulfill an obligation or a duty. We're having a trine between the Mars, and it's starting with the sun, but with the moon and Venus. So there is a sense of commitment or responsibility, perhaps, and a need to communicate the emotions. Moon is emotions, and in Gemini, it wants to share, it wants to communicate, it wants to socialize. So definitely there is a lot of social activity. I mean, this is great for even seeing friends that we haven't seen in a long time, communication from them, and taking action on things. Taking action towards communicating, and it's just overall good for like getting together and anything communication, information driven. There should be a lot coming out, you know, in the news. If you're, you know, a news junkie or whatever, a lot of stuff's coming up around well, foreign policy and the world situation. Obviously governments communication and technology, the way we communicate, relationships in general, and things that maybe were hidden with this Neptune coming out by the end of the week. And financial, markets, maybe restrictions, having to step in and restrict something, even holding your tongue and restricting, or like being judicious with your words. It's possible. All right, so we get to the 15th, and then the moon is going into Cancer. And let's see. Moon is in Cancer, and that's the sign that it rules. Goes into Cancer pretty early, like morning to afternoon, midday on the East Coast. We've got the sun is starting to really tighten up with that trine to Mars, bringing communication and action to relationships. Hopefully there's an era of diplomacy to try to bring some balance to situations. But the sun is starting to make a square to Pluto, not quite yet, but it's almost like we see this thing on the horizon. That's Pluto, and we know that the Pluto is definitely like very controlling, and it's also this transformation that we need to go through and things that we need to face. It's fears and obsessions, and so there could be this sense building from Saturday into Sunday of this impending wall that we're going to hit when we have the sun square to Pluto. It can be literal or figurative death, even. Hopefully not literal. But if it is, I mean, it's figuratively, it's the death of a financial system, because we've got Venus participating here. And there's just things that have to come out with the sun and Venus making an inconjunct to Neptune, because there's a lack of clarity with Neptune. Things are obscured. There's propaganda. I mean, fear porn on steroids with the moon. Cancer moon is very protective and seeking security. It represents the home, right? The family, the mother, and everything that represents what makes us feel emotionally secure. It's the past. So it can be very emotional. And the moon is making a square to Jupiter, right? And then it will make a square after that on the 15th to Mercury. So there's a lot of perhaps seeing something that is not just and not fair, and then needing to speak up about it to make things just and fair. So that is Saturday. That's a 4-day. 4 always makes me think of the home and stability, 4 walls, the foundation. And also on the 15th, the sun, Mars, and Vesta, the asteroid Vesta, which is at 24 degrees of Aquarius. Vesta is also about home and hearth, and this idea of keeping the hearth fire burning. So it's like devotion and not giving up on something, keeping it sacred. It's sacred. So there is some there is some kind of action here trying to keep the sanctity and the safety and the security, taking action, bringing justice to situations that might seem to be out of balance too. And then we get to Sunday. Again, moon is in Cancer. It has squared Mercury. So there's sort of an mental emotional component to this, needing to make a decision, perhaps looking back at the past, evaluating relationships. The moon is going to square Chiron, so there can be some wounding or offendedness coming up, or insecurity around the self and the identity. And yeah, so that's Sunday. That's a 5-day. Now, one thing I want to discuss, and then before I'm gonna leave it for the second segment. So that pretty much wraps up the week of October 10th through the 16th. And I am going to stop the video and the recording here before I go on to the next portion. And I'll catch you on the flip side.